Very, very known statement in Kabbalah and Zohar, Midas HaChesed, the attribute of kindness, came to complain to the Rabbi Shalom that it felt ineffective once Avraham was created. That's what it says, Rabbi Jacobson, right? I'm not a big lump, but I learned once, if I remember correctly, as Midas HaChesed is complaining to the Rabbi Shalom that after Avraham Avinu was created, it lost its effect because Avraham brought in a different level of chesed. Now this is before the times of Matan Torah, before the times of our generation. For those of you who understand that the Avraham that we are gathered here tonight for, if Midas HaChesed was complaining when Avraham Avinu started his initiative of Chesed, as I was saying once, that Avraham Avinu, he had a tent, he had 4 doors, but it was in the desert. Avraham Lider was here, it wasn't just in Crown Heights, it was all over. Anybody that ever needed help, if it was people from Eretz Yisrael, if it was people from all over the United States, it was people from all over the world. I was just sitting on a plane, literally landed an hour ago, and I was listening, I had a long time to listen to the voice notes from Avraham, as the way we used to call him, me and my brother Bill, we used to call him Avraham. You know, always used to come in and we had to go sometimes into someone and ask for something. And he would say, Kuka B'Yigalach. Let's look at Charlie, we had both of them. After L'chaim, he has the big bulgy blue eyes, and I had my big blue eyes, and we would walk into someone, and okay, what can we do? But it took a whole Avraham leader, took the Midas HaChesed to a whole different level. And it's very hard for me that I still didn't come to terms with myself, but it's not about me tonight. That at a certain point when I was listening to the messages, sorry I'm going to say something a little difficult, at a certain point when I was listening to the messages, I said to myself, after reflecting on what happened at Tafshin Pei Aleph in the world, in a very difficult year, and it was after coming from a long corona, the messages that Rabbi sent me and Belfort, everybody that was able and involved in Abbas Chesed, the people were doing, about people in the hospital, about getting food in, about helping and running and taking from those who are alive to those who are dead, and helping people getting out of the hospital, getting into the hospital. And at one point, listening to the messages, I'm sorry to say that to the leader family, felt to me that our Rabbi told the Rabbi Shalom on Rosh Hashanah by night, listen, take me because I'm going to try to stop certain things that are happening this year. I don't, the level of doing, you know, the whole thing of Rosh Hashanah is echod, the Rebbe's, all the letters of the Rebbe that the Rebbe writes, the May B'nois Yisrael, before Rosh Hashanah, most of the Nichtavim, Klolim of the Rebbe brings out the Nekuda that everything was created many, but Adam was created only one. A lot of animals, a lot of trees, a lot of waters, a lot of fish. Adam was created only one. Why? Because one individual can change the world. You know that Yosef HaTzadik, that his day is also on Rosh Hashanah. He says, I am the one that is going to change the world. He was in Mitzrayim. His brothers got rid of him. He had nobody. He didn't know nothing to anyone. It wasn't the days of WhatsApp cameras and pictures would go around. You could have done whatever you wanted. And he made that choice to be that person that because of him we are all here today. Yosef HaTzadik. Avraham Avinu was that individual. Avraham leader could have said, listen, let everybody else do chesed. I mean, you think about the name of the organization, Ahavas Chesed. Now, again, I did not have a lot of time with Rabbi leader the way some people here in this room had, especially family, especially my brother Chochel, who is here tonight, and other friends in the community. But I had enough time with Rabbi. And I want to say what Ahavas Chesed. There's a lot of chesed organizations, but sometimes people do chesed because they have to do chesed. There's a situation, I need to help. There's a chesed that is made with love. A chesed that is made Ahavas Chesed. I love to help somebody else. I love to do a favor for another Yid. I remember going to the hospital in the morning with him. And there was a time I didn't have a job. And I was walking around and I'm looking for a job. And Rabbi Lida said to me, come work with me. We'll get zusammen, we'll go together, with the Egalach, I say, when do I meet you? He says, yeah, come, you'll pick me up, I'll pick you up. We'll go Kings County, 8 o'clock in the morning. Come to Kings County, we open up the books, we're looking for some names of Jewish people who got delivered during the night. We're going to this guy, to that kid, to this parent, to this doctor, to this. Constantly, and you think to yourself, what is the benefit? It's not some sort of organization, you know. He was the organization, he was the doctor, he was the lawyer, he was involved in making a phone call. This is a chesed which is called Ahavas Chesed, a chesed that comes from love. Before I call up, who's going to make the scene? You ready to make? Before I call up Naftali to make the scene, I want to share with you a little story that happened a few weeks ago that reminded me of a few weeks ago, whole New York stopped, the whole Jewish world stopped. A child got lost. Remember? Somewhere in Flatbush, he was going with his camp on a trip, and the child got lost. In 1 second, some people were triggered with the history of a child getting lost. The entire Jewish community, the WhatsApp groups, the messages, the text messages, Hatzolah, Shmirel, Chaverim, Shemrim, police, everybody was involved. And then there was one Yid, a 60-year-old Yid, who ended up being the one who found that child. And it reminded me of Rabbi Leader. I want to try to explain to you, sitting here tonight, and we're trying to remember who Rabbi Leader was, and who are we, those who got in touch with him, our responsibility of a chai to them. A 60-year-old man said on an interview that a message came across that says that volunteers are needed. He thought to himself, what can I do? Old man, am I going to be able to go find a child that is lost somewhere and nobody knows where he is? Then he said to himself, what if it was my income? Would I stay in bed? And he got up, man in his 60s, and went around, and he was the one to hear the child cry, Tati, and save the day. The power of the individual. How many times that I seek and I try to, I don't want to play Boy Scouts. How many times did I tell Avraham, love us up, there's other organizations, leave it. Dudi, Amen, Chitzter, Amen, Mikuz Alavai, I don't want to bury him somewhere in Yehukitzville, I want to bury him, the guy's dead. Let Chavre Kadisha deal with it. I said, Avraham, and it told them, tell him to get off my back. But this is the guy who he was. This is the guy here. So I know I didn't make my necessary right to say, he is there fighting for all of us. And he is there, I hope he's there. Even the Meshamish, and he makes sure the Abbas Chesed that very, very soon, taken from Yad Mamish, we should see him over here, Dol Mato, it's time already. The Shomas Berufen taken from Yad Mamish. I would like to call Aftali. The love that Avraham had for his kids is unprecedented. I will talk about the love that he had for Tammy, but I don't know if this is there. Every time we get a vacation, we get in Yom HaMelech, I'm not going to talk about all the planning, and the diet Eshkoliot, and all the good stuff. But I just want to say, dedication to the family, the care, the loving conversations that is going to be with us, and those who are close to him, especially those who are very, very close to him, how much he cared for each and every one of his children and his family. Then I made it to Naftali, please come up and see. Pay attention to the video screen. A very special presentation prepared by Rasi, yes, by the leader family about Avraham. Please pay attention to the screen.
Sitting in the hot desert sun, you've been told you'll be on the run, down to Egypt, to Pharaoh's town, to Rome and Spain, the other land. But you open your door to tired men, to lonely passers-by, angels from heaven. Your kindness and your care are known far and wide. Father of the nation, your soul is alive. Avraham, are we the children that you dreamed of? Are we that shining star you saw at night? No, it's true, we still call you Amigo. Our Father, our bride, we got your soul inside. Take us home, take us home. We've been through every test. Now look the small shore, the big waves. The child was born just the other day, and all those gathered there heard his mother say, "Oh, it's been 3,000 years, and we've been fighting out all the tears. One man's lullaby, a nation will survive. Father of our people, your dream is alive. Abraham, are we the children that you dreamed of? Are we that shining star you saw at night? You know it's true, we still call you Amigo. Our Father, our bride, we got your soul inside. Take us home. Come again, you might get the barrels up at night. No man could hold you, no stranger will forget. Come again, you might get the barrels up at night. No man could hold you, no stranger will forget. Yes, we're the children that you dreamed of, and we're that shining star you saw at night. You know it's true, why we call you Amigo. Our Father and bride, we got your soul inside. Take us home. Our Father and bride, we got your soul inside. Take us home. Abraham, yes, we're the children that you dreamed of, and we're that shining star you saw at night. No, it's true, it's why we call you Amigo. Our Father, our bride, we got your soul inside. Take us home. Our Father, our bride, we got your soul inside. Take us home. Take us home. Our Father, our bride, we got your soul inside. Take us home. Take us home.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very hard to believe that Rabbi is not here. Our leader. There wasn't an event. There wasn't a situation. How many times, if it's from making sure that the Israeli bacher gets treated, and I would say something more about, I said before about Abbas Chesed, how the name suits the organization of what Rabbi Leader was all about. Remember one night, I'm already in bed, I'm going to sleep, my phone is ringing, Rabbi Leader is on the phone. Some accident happened or something happened, some people ended up over here in Kings County Hospital. I'm coming to pick you up. So he comes to pick me up, and they were delivering people, and Remi's running around in the ER, he's making sure, he's pushing beds around and yelling at people back. I walked out for a moment. I walked out to the waiting area of the ER at Kings County, and they were sitting the family from Cronite with a young child, waiting. Maybe there was some sort of emergency, I'm sure this in the ER. And I thought to myself at that moment, my leader is busy inside the emergency room, pushing beds around. He was doing it very often. He was like, hop on the bed, get low, move it over here, get the doctor, move it to room one. It's not, you gotta do that. I was thinking to myself at the moment, what would, I remember he's busy inside that situation, accident that happened in the middle of the night. What would he do? So I had that tag that we had that scan to open up the doors. And I was supposed to come in and I tell the family with the girl, follow me, come inside, sit down in triage number one. Felt for a moment what it is to be Rabbi leader. But that's what his dedication. Tonight we have a guest with us, a live witness of what is called a Mekayim Nefesh Achas Nisol Kilo Kiyem Olam. Mr. Gottesman, Shlomo here. Shlomo Gottesman, who is going to say his story in this connection to Rabbi Yehuda. Please come on.
I'm sure, like many of you, I don't know how I'm going to get through speaking now after seeing that video and those pictures of my leader. We all miss him so much. When you see him like that, it's hard to believe he's not with us. How did I meet Rabbi Leader? It was a Friday afternoon, and a woman in Crown Heights, actually in Troy Avenue and Kings Highway, decided that red lights weren't her thing. She went through. I was on a motorcycle. She hit me. She threw me 30 feet in the air. I slid another 30 feet on the ground, and they declared me dead at the scene. And I can show you later. I have it from the fire department where it says this position dead prior to arrival. So you can imagine when my wife was called, they weren't very positive. In fact, in the ambulance, Hatzalah managed to get into the fire department ambulance. She got a call from Hatzalah, and she asked the guy, Hatzalah, just tell me he's going to be okay. He said, I can't tell you that. She didn't know what to do. They said, if he's alive, he's going to be in Kings County. She made one phone call to a local doctor. And he called him back 10 minutes later. He said, any call I made, only one name came up, Rabbi Leader. I called, I got through to him. He's going to be waiting for you at the hospital. And of course he was. And he met Judith at the emergency room, and then he disappeared. Where was he? He was inside the CAT scan room with me because he didn't want a doctor to give her the good news or the bad news. He was going to be the one to tell her what's going on. And indeed, it wasn't a doctor or a nurse or a patient advocate who told her that I was going to live. It was Rabbi Leader. And he said, okay, he's going to live. Two things. I'm clearing out a room for him in the ICU because it's Arab Shabbos. In a few minutes, the gunshot wounds are going to start coming in. It's going to get crazy here. So we're moving him upstairs. Once I move him upstairs, it was like, I think he pushed the gurney. He says, once we move him upstairs, we're going to go get Shabbos. And sure enough, he took my wife shopping, went Shabbos. It turns out, and I'll explain why it's important later, but it turns out that he knew my wife's family from Crown Heights, my wife's grandparents. The Golombeks lived across the street from Mrs. Leader's family. And that's how I met Rabbi Leader. I mean, I was not really conscious, I didn't really meet him. But Shabbos, in the middle of the night, he showed up. Shabbos morning, he showed up. Shabbos afternoon, he showed up. It was just unbelievable. He wasn't going to let my wife be Shabbos alone in the hospital. He was going to be with her, and he was. And then it came time, my hand had to be rebuilt. They said there was only a 5 or 10% chance I'd ever be able to make a fist, but you see, it worked. And there were only 2 surgeons in New York who could do the surgery. One was in Maimonides. He happened to have been my next door neighbor. And the other one was the surgeon who taught this guy how to do it. And he agreed to come to Kings County and do the surgery on Tuesday morning, but only if it was the first surgery of the day. He didn't trust the hospital to be clean enough. He would only do that surgery, the first surgery of the day. Monday was a very bad day for me. Third day, or Friday, Monday, day off. But Monday was a very bad day, and they canceled my surgery without telling anyone. Ironically, there was a lot of hashgacha here. The chief resident was a kid who I was at his bar mitzvah, I was at his chasana, a kid who lived in my neighborhood. He also was an orthopedic surgeon, and he said, don't worry, I'll get it pushed back on for the first surgery of the day. He couldn't get it done. We spoke to another doctor. He said, I have the protection, couldn't get it done. They came back and they said, it's impossible. Cannot get that slot anymore. You're going to have to wait a few weeks, and you'll have to go to the other hospital. And the prognosis wasn't as good if I wasn't going to have it done right away. And my wife said, the leader said, if you need anything, call him. So we already spoke to the head administrator. We had already spoke to that chief resident. Okay. I said, so call him. She called him. 10 minutes later, he came into my room and said, I don't know what happened, but your surgery is on for tomorrow. Only Rabbi Leader. I had a nurse in the hospital, a Nigerian man named Sunday Adioson. He was the only nurse that was able to move me around because I had 7 broken ribs, a collapsed lung. So I couldn't move myself. He was the only one strong enough to move. And he told me, he said, Rabbi Leader affects every employee in this hospital. Because when they watch him do what he does, with the sincerity, with the dedication, with the love for people he never met before, it makes us want to do a better job of what we do. Rabbi Leader was very much like my father. My father, his 3rd Yartzeit will be this Hanukkah. And my father told me 2 things are the most important thing in life. To have good friends and to be a good friend, and to have a Karsa. And that was Rabbi Leader. He was the best friend he could have, and he had tremendous Karsa, and we'll get to that at the end. Rabbi Leader, he was the worst fundraiser I knew. And I don't think it's because he was a bad fundraiser. He didn't have time to raise funds because he was busy 24/7. I don't know when he slept, 24/7, helping people and doing chasadim. And I learned a lesson from him. Rabbi Leader did not do a chesed because it was a scale. He didn't do something for someone, oh, I'm going to pay this guy back, he's going to pay me back. There was no chesed. When he did a chesed, he just created a star in the sky that just existed forever. If that person did anything bad to him, if that person did 10 times more for him, it didn't diminish the chesed that he did. That star existed, and it exists forever. And every chesed he ever did, it's there. And it's not a little star, it's a constellation. It's a giant constellation of chasadim that will never go away. And it's a lesson to us. Don't do something because you owe somebody something or you think you're going to get something back. Be Rabbi Leader. Do it because it's a chesed. A chesed is there to be done, and it will exist forever. And I would get a call. By the way, Rabbi Leader asked me for one thing, never, not money, not favors. He said, when you make the Suda Saldah, make it at 571 Kingston at my soup kitchen. And we did. 271, I'm sorry, 271 Kingston. And we did, and guess what? By accident, he raised a lot of money that night. My friend saw what he was doing, and they all wanted to help. I would get calls from Rabbi Leader. You couldn't say no to Rabbi Leader because you knew he never said no to anyone. He once called me. There was a breakfast for New York Health and Hospital, and he wanted me to speak about what they do at Kings County. I had something that morning. I canceled it because Rabbi Leader asked me. Another time, this nurse who took care of me at Kings County was being honored as Nurse of the Year. Rabbi Leader said, I want you to present him with the award. Again, I had some family thing. I was happy to get out of it. But I said, Judith, the Rabbi Leader asked, I have to go. But he was so sensitive, Rabbi Leader. I remember one Purim, I'm listening to Megillah, and my phone was ringing as Rabbi Leader. As soon as I finished Megillah, I called, what's going on? He said, Shloimeh, there's an elderly Yid in the hospital. He was in a motor vehicle accident. He's depressed. He's niyayish. I need you to come and cheer him up. Purim morning, we have plans Purim, but Rabbi Leader says that there's an elderly Yid in the hospital who needs cheering up. You don't say no. And of course I would. But that was Rabbi Leader. And I wanted to talk about Hakar Satov and what it means. We think Hakar Satov means, you did something for me, I appreciate it. Look, this is an example. Rabbi Leader did some great things for me, I appreciate it. They asked me to come to speak, I'm happy to do it. That's easy, that's Hakar Satov. I'm going to tell you what Hakar Satov is. I told you before that Rabbi Leader knew my wife's grandfather. I'm not going to get into details, but when he found out who my wife was and who her family was, he started crying. And he told my wife, you don't understand the chesed, the things that your grandfather did for me. And he said, he is one of the reasons why I do what I do, why I do the chesed that I do. The hakaras he had, the hakaras Satov he had wasn't to an individual. The hakaras Satov that he had was, wow, someone who doesn't know me is doing this for me. It was a lesson that he internalized, and he had that hakaras Satov, and he spread it to the world. Not only that, I'm sure there were other things in his life that influenced him. But the hakaras Satov that he had was to Klal Yisrael, that someone did a chesed to him. He understood. I mean, who understands? Somebody owes that person something. They feel indebted to that person. They feel that Hakar Satov to him. Rabbi Leader had a different concept. If someone did something, a chesed for me, I have to repay the entire world. I have to become a Baal Chesed, and that's what Hakar Satov is. It's Rosh Hashanah now. Finish Rosh Hashanah. seriously made tshuva, it's the new year. And my bracha to you is not really a bracha, just learn from Rabbi Leader. Don't think about doing things. Be Rabbi Leader. Just do. Don't think, do, because that's what he did. He didn't think, he didn't plan, there was something in front of him, he just did it. And don't do because there's a scale. There's no scale when it comes to chesed. And Rabbi Leader taught me that. There is no scale. You do a chesed and it just exists. No matter what else happens afterwards, do that chesed. And the last thing is, have hakaras hatov. And hakaras hatov means not just to the individual who is your benefactor or who did you the favor. Have hakaras hatov and understand that chasodim, when they're done for you, it's a lesson to you. You know what? I have to figure out a way to make the world better. One thing I can tell you, the world was a better place because of Rabbi Leader. And just because he's gone doesn't have to mean that the world is going to be diminished beyond the fact that we miss Rabbi Leader. We can take those lessons and we can be, each one of us, little Rabbi Leaders, and continue to make the world as good as he tried to make it. Thank you very much for having
me. What else? After you hear this, L'chayit and Libra, it's our responsibility to continue because we came in contact and talked with Rabbi Leader. We have with us Rabbi Simon Jacobson, who has been an inspiration to each and every one of us here and around the world. I have to tell you, Rabbi Simon Jacobson is. We have a schus and honor to have with us Rabbi Simon Jacobson himself. Is very close with Rabbi Leader. Say a few words in honor of Rabbi Leader.
So firstly, to the family, with all the friends gathered, everyone online. I mean, wow, what could you say? To me, the first question that comes to mind is, how do you replicate this? Is there a formula? Or are some people just wired to be chesed 24/7, through and through, in every fiber of their being? So, it reminded me of a story I heard with the Rebbe, about the Rebbe, who Rabbi Leader was, of course, the devout chassid of. I think it happened in the 70s, the Lamed. So at that point, the Rebbe was having personal audiences, people came to see him. But not everybody could get in because there's a long line, a long wait. So there was some Jew from out of town who wanted to get a bracha, a blessing from the Rebbe. He couldn't get an appointment. So one of the rabbis, the shluchim he knew, said to him, I'll tell you some inside trade secrets of it. And the Rebbe davens mincha every day at 3:15, at 3:30. When mincha ends, stand outside, on the floor where the Rebbe would give dollars near the elevator, stand on the side, the Rebbe would return from the shul to his room, and there you can say a few words to the Rebbe and ask him whatever you need. Anyway, well, he did that, but he was a little naive. He didn't realize how many self-appointed bodyguards there are and bouncers. As soon as some of the Bochum got a wind what's going on, they blocked him. He didn't have the 770 experience that you don't let anyone block you. And they basically never let him get over to the Rebbe. Okay. Plan foiled. Didn't work out. So this Shliach Rabbi told him, no, there's another answer for you. In the morning, lives on President Street, and there shouldn't be any walking, it's outside. The Rebbe walks from his house to the car, where he's driven to 770 for the day. So you'll stand down the steps there near the Rebbe's house, and that's where you'll have your opportunity. Well, it's true, there nobody can block it, but there were walking there. And he did have his conversation, 7 minutes, he spoke to the Rebbe, asking for whatever he needed. And the Rebbe patiently responded, and you could imagine what happened afterwards. After the Rebbe got into the car, the Bachram, the students that were there, gave him what they say, how do you say it? What do you say? Almost a mashkanta, almost they gave him a real whipping with words. How do you do that without an appointment? It's not respectful, take the Rebbe's valuable time. Anyway, again, he felt all guilty of this, so he wrote a note to the Rebbe, telling him that he must apologize. He wasn't aware, but some of the devout Chassidim and students of the Rebbe made it clear to him that what he did was wrong. Okay, so what do you think happened? The Rebbe didn't respond to this fellow. He sent out a note to the yeshiva Hanhola, to the faculty of the yeshiva, and he said to them the following, a few things he said. Find out which Bachrim were 10 o'clock in the morning on President Street, because as far as he knows, the schedule then is that Bachrim should be davening Shachris. What are they doing on President Street? And two, and this is the main point that I want to make, the Rebbe wrote that you should tell the Bachrim that the Baal Shem Tov said, one of the most famous statements from the Baal Shem Tov, say in Yiddish, I'll translate, as an Neshama kommt herab und lebt 70-80 Jahre. Macht sich in der Welt zu tun Teva vereinigen. The soul comes down and rears in tears on this earth for 70, 80 years, perhaps just to do a favor for one Jew. And how do they know that this wasn't the favor that the Rebbe had to do for one Jew on this earth? How are they getting involved in such cosmic, lofty matters? This is the Rebbe saying. You can imagine the Rebbe did more than one favor for the Jew, but how do they know which favor? So this Baal Shem Tov statement is well known, there are songs about it. As I'm listening to the speakers, the family, and actually today I made a bunch of phone call people who knew Rabbi Leader well. I mean, I'm looking for some story, the problem is there are thousands of stories. Like you mentioned, Mr. Gottesman mentioned. Thousands of stories, literally. Here, a wheelchair. Here, standing in the doctor's office, the biggest cancer doctor in Cornell. And when they say, what are you doing here? He says, I won't leave. You know, these type of completely super rational commitment to chesed. And I remind myself of the Rebbe's story, Baal Shem Tov's words. That there are people, they're rare, a minority, but there are, who this is what beats in their hearts and their chests and their souls. Why did the Neshama come down to earth? I never asked this question to Rabbi Leader, because he was just such a walking chesed, a living chesed. But you don't ask those questions. That's for professors and laboratory researchers. You just see it, so you're just inspired. But I have no doubt that's what he lived with. Why is your Neshama on this earth? And how many people even ask that question? And the Baal Shem Tov says, you know what kind of statement that is? That means, the Rebbe once said it in a talk that he delivered in 1987. He said, that means you can be on this earth and daven 3 times a day and eat kosher and the most mahadrim in a mahadrim and be the most religious Jew on earth. In a real way, not a hypocrite, a fake, a real, and dedicated to everything. And it could be that that's not the reason why your soul came to earth. That means once you're here, obviously you have to do all the mitzvahs that you can do. But why were you sent to this world? Why you and not someone else? So once we're here, we do all these mitzvahs. You were sent here to do a favor for another. I mean, it's a pretty radical and revolutionary statement, but it makes you think. The thing is, we don't know which person it is and which favor it is. So those people that live with this live their entire lives because every person they meet is perhaps that person. But it's not even with the cheshbon. It's not like you calculate, oh, I'm going to fulfill my purpose on earth. It's just what makes the person be who they are. I don't know if you can replicate it, but we could say this. You know, what makes a person like that tick? You know, it may even be demeaning to ask such a question because they are who they are. But still, some of us want to figure out how we can perhaps be a little less selfish and a little more chesed. So I remember a story that both Rabbi Avraham and myself said I was close to him. I wasn't as close as many of you are, but I was close. Like he was close with everybody. Thank God I never needed the services. And I sure hope you never will, because they'll have to come back. It wouldn't be bad. But I remember this was talking about Rosh Hashanah, Tafshin Yun. So we're talking now 22 years ago. Tafshin Yun, yeah, 32 years ago, sorry. 32 years ago. Tragedy occurred in Crown Heights. Many of you remember it probably. A young man passed away long before his time, leaving a wife and little children. And it was right before Tishrei, it was the month of Elul. Rabbi Sharf. Now, I'll never forget this because it's like, it was so unprecedented. The Rebbe, on Sukkot, would speak every night after the evening service. In the later years, in those years, the Rebbe, in order for everybody to be able to hear, or at least more people to hear, they moved the Rebbe's bima, his stand, closer to the center of the shul. Now, I had the merit that's supposed to be a chayzer, someone who listened and remembered, absorbed, and retained, and then published, and wrote and published the words of the Rebbe. So I stood very close. I was on the floor, on the ground. The Rebbe was up on the bima, the platform, and the Rebbe would usually be speaking. And the shul was packed. Talking about Tishrei in those years. Literally wall to wall. Thousands and thousands of people. And Rabbi Leader, who I met right afterwards, because he wasn't close by, but I was. And we see that the Rebbe is not speaking, he's standing and waiting. Nobody knows why. And completely uncharacteristic, because the Rebbe was second counted, especially in Tichel and Tzibur, there were so many people waiting. And then the Rebbe whispers to his secretary, and I heard it because I was very close by, he said, "Where are the Sharf children? We'll find Sharf little kids, what are they, 4, 5, 6 years old, I don't know what they are. Where are you going to find them? A needle in a haystack." So some of these even more than a haystack. We'll find children. Maybe they already went home, so who knew they were there? But you know how it is, the miracles that happen in this domain. People look and suddenly, yeah, there we go. 3 little boys are being carried over people, and that's how it was done. They would carry them like that. They ended up right near the Rebbe. And they stood there. I don't know if they had a clue what they were doing there, but they were there, and the Rebbe began to speak. So that alone was already, that the Rebbe would do that in such a public way. But there's something more which less people noticed. But after that night I met Rabbi Leader outside. We were talking about it. And I saw by him it wasn't like a chiddush. This is like, this is role model. This is what you do. We never saw the Rebbe do it in such a blatant way. But here's what happened. Every Shabbos after that, every Shabbos, these 3 little boys would stand to the right of the Rebbe, by a fabrik. The Rebbe would make kiddush. And nonchalantly, the Rebbe would take a few pieces of cake from this bowl on the table and just pass it to the children. They enjoyed the rest of the fabrik eating this marble cake. After a while, it became so customary, nobody even noticed. But I literally brought me to tears every week when I looked at it. Here the Rebbe was about to deliver a Avraham, and for thousands of you has what to contribute, the Rebbe has what to say, everyone's waiting, and has the composure and the presence, in a way not even to take himself so seriously when he's going to do with Avraham, to just show that kindness, that chesed. Often when I'm interviewed, especially in the secular world, about the Rebbe, and they say, tell me something about it. So everyone wants to hear something brilliant, some revolutionary, pioneering thing. Of course, there's much of that. I often share this story because to me, it's the simplest acts like this that capture the essence of a person. Because you have many reasons, many other things you could be doing. And I know we're here to talk about Rabbi Leader, but I guarantee if he was here, he would say, tell stories about the Rebbe, don't talk about me. So that's what I'm doing. But it's really a tribute to him, that's why we're here. And the Baal Shem Tov, talk about the Baal Shem Tov doing a favor for a Jew. How did the Baal Shem Tov begin his career, quote unquote? It wasn't a very big money-making career, by the way. The Baal Shem Tov wasn't a good fundraiser either. He began by being a teacher's helper. Not even a teacher. He was like a bus, equivalent of a bus driver. He walked the children to school. I mean, talk about a non-glamorous position. But he wanted to elicit from them a Baruch Hashem, a blessing in food, the like his Eibishter. And then his whole life embodied chesed. So my first memory of Rabbi Leader was actually pre-1A teacher of my son, as he was of many other children. And I asked my dear friend Bill, so why did he leave Chinuch? He said, because he was so consumed with the chesed. There was no time. The Baal Shem Tov too, at some point, didn't remain a teacher's attendant. He became the Baal Shem Tov. But all these so-called simple, small acts mostly go unnoticed. I mean, here, yes, we're gathered. Some of us are beautiful stories. I'm sure there's so many more. But I can assure you, without even having to guess, that for every story we know, there's probably 1,000 others. Literally, I called today probably 10 people. Called Australia, the brother in Australia, called some nephews, some people I just know. Everyone had a story. And I was thinking, which story should I tell? At the end of this, everyone has more or less a simple story that, for no reason at all, Rabbi Leader just shows up and helps. I mean, I don't find many people that do that. And there's stories we hear in Baal Shem Tov's times that they were such Jews. And I'm sure one day when stories will be told, they'll say, okay, yeah, it's one of these Baal Shem Tov stories. But no, we saw a man, a looking man, living man, father, brother, friend. So I look at it and I say to myself, okay, Abdudi mentioned, an neshama that leaves on the first night of Rosh Hashanah is not a simple matter. God decides when neshamas come and go. Tuesday Rosh Hashanah is the night when the whole world goes into a comatose state, only to be renewed. So we are simple people. We can't speculate why the neshama is taken on that day, and particularly last year. This last year, too, have been such challenging years. The person more discussing is even more now, more than ever. But nevertheless, it's important to take note. So I heard from one of the secretaries of the Rebbe that in 1962, 63 maybe, 62 or 63, the Rebbe told the secretary that everyone who writes a note to me for a request, for a blessing, make an index card. Create basically what was called then a Rolodex. Today it's called a contact list, a database, whatever it's called. Everyone wants an index card with their name, their address, their phone number, all their contact information. So I have a record of everyone that reaches out here. And at the end of the year, the Rebbe is accustomed to send a Rosh Hashanah letter to everyone that written to him. So I'm sure many of you, and probably you know about it, the Rebbe would send a letter with his own signature to every person, before Rosh Hashanah. There was one chassid, which I should mention, who actually the Rebbe wrote the whole letter handwritten. His name was Rabbi Shmuel Levin. You probably know that, right? Now, just for the record, I don't know if you know that we're a shtickle family. Yeah. Tema is the daughter of Rabbi Gershon Ber Bahara, who in turn had a son who was married to Vela or Zev Levitin, who had a son called Rav Shmuel, and had a daughter called Vera Hud, who happens to be my great grandmother. Okay, so we got Yichus. Yeah. So the Rebbe would write a full letter handwritten. He was the only one that received a completely handwritten letter. Everyone received a letter. Now with these index cards, the Rebbe said we can send to everyone. And that's what happened. After, I believe after the 3 weeks, we're not Chodesh all the time, the Rebbe instructed his secretariat, now start preparing these letters. Start preparing these letters so they should go out in time. Yeah, the Rebbe was a person of schedule and time. And so they began preparing. There's a certain form letter. The Rebbe would review them all. He would always add something personal, or definitely sign it. And they began preparing the letters. Brought them into the Rebbe's office, and left it for the Rebbe to go review them all and then sign them. So one day the secretary goes in. Yes, all the letters are signed. A big pile of letters. But there's a small pile on the side that the Rebbe separated. Put it on the second pile. And when he saw the secretary wondering what's going on, so the Rebbe said, these are the people were passed on in between when these letters were prepared. The Rebbe had taken each one out. So besides that, the Rebbe knowing exactly what's going on. So it was a separate one. So Rabbi Avraham, the secretary, who I heard the story from, took both piles and was about to leave the Rebbe's office to prepare them for mailing. And the Rebbe said, where are you taking the small pile? He said, the Rebbe said they're gone, so they passed. So there's no need for these letters. And I don't know if he said throw them out, but bottom line, he was suggesting that, and the Rebbe said the following words. Listen to these words. The Rebbe said, firstly, they also need a Shana Teva, these souls. Und zweitens, der Adresse wird zu schicken, ist am besten nicht. And secondly, the address where to send them, you probably don't know. So leave them here. This is such an amazing story because it tells us, first of all, everyone has an address. Every neshama has an address. The fact that we don't know the address, no surprise. What do we know already? We barely know addresses on earth, you know? But the second thing is that the Rebbe does know that address. He told him to leave the letters there. So we don't know the mysteries of God's ways, the journey of the soul, why we come to this world when we do, and why, whatever mysterious reason, some of us, even special souls, are taken when they're taken. These are mysteries that we will never have answers for. But we do know that there's an address, and we do know that everybody needs a Shana Teva. I have no doubt that Rabbi Avraham, your husband, your father, a friend, a person who's done chesed for thousands, if not tens, who knows how many people. And we know one chesed lives on and on because it can save a life, which in turn saves many other lives. So what we do know is that there's an address, and I have no doubt that that address is very close, if not in the center of the Shara Chesed, the gate of Chesed in heaven, where the Rebbe and all the Rabbeim of Chesed reside. And when God created the world, He asked two consultants whether He should create the world. They had names, Mr. Emes and Mr. Chesed. God asked Emes, should He create the world? And Emes said, absolutely not. It's a world only started. It's a world full of liars, deceivers, duplicity, dissonance, and so on. How could you create a world? But Emes agreed to create a world of sheker, false. And then God turned to Mr. Chesed. Chesed, should we create the world? Should I create the world? And he says, absolutely yes. Because despite the sheker or the corruption of the world, people will do a lot of chesed. So the Medrash says that God took Emes and threw it to the ground and used chesed to create the world. Why did He throw it to the ground? So it says, because Emes me'eretz titzmach. He didn't discard it. He didn't say, no, I'm not listening to you. Of course, God, Hashem Elokim Emes, God knows a few things about truth. But to create a world like ours, We need more chesed than emes. But emes will also ultimately emerge. God was saying that we'll create it with kindness and love and chesed. And ultimately, that will reveal emes. So it's not just choosing one or the other. It's just a question which direction you take. You hear about a person like Rabbi Avraham, embodied chesed. And I agree, Sefer HaBoyer, the chesed of Atzilus says, I have no job when a man like Avraham is walking this earth. Avraham. So we have a person who has created chesed forever, as you mentioned, stars that never die, and continue to impact us and others. And there's no question, I'll just repeat the lesson, it's very clear. We have living examples, that are meant to teach us and guide us to some way be a little less self-absorbed. Self-interest drives this world, as many of the cynics say. But the fact of the matter is that we have the capacity, even if we're not 100% emes, but to do total chesed. And every time we do, we change the current of self-absorption and reach out to someone else. And that is what changes the world. That is how the Jews, from Avraham on, that's what distinguished us. An am shel chesed. And what did God ultimately say? That a man like Avraham Avinu, because he is one of his basic achim, a person who committed himself and his family, lasted tzedakah mishpat, to do tzedakah and mishpat, kindness, charity, virtue, chesed. This is a person that I cannot deny, because that will live on, and we are here. As the song we heard when the video was playing, the stars that Avraham Avinu saw. Here we are, twinkling, Tovshin Pei Beis, thousands of years later. And Rabbi Avraham, who we're honoring, is a distinguished member in this link, in this marathon. People who did not give in and surrender to the trend of people just taking care of themselves. And once in a while they do a chesed. But someone the exact opposite, entire life of chesed, probably once in a while did something. He had no choice. You have to eat a meal at the end of the day and probably sleep, take care of his family. So to honor, we're standing here and talking about a person like this, and ultimately, as we go to Yom Kippur, we go to the New Year, it really comes down to our hachotas, our resolutions that we make right now. To understand why His Yer Neshama came down to this world. It's to do a favor for another. But we can't suffice with one because we don't know who that other is. And we don't make those calculations anyway. So the merit of this 1 year, Rosh Hashanah, of Avraham's first Yartzeit, which also is a word that's hard to say about a person who embodies eternity and eternal chesed. May we all have the Tovshin Pei Beis year, like the Rebbe said 30 years ago, Teishnas, Neflois Bakel, may there be wonders and everything. So Plois, without the noon is Pei Beis, should be a wondrous year. Ren Neflois, wonders in all the areas of our lives, starting with Bonei Chaim Zeiner Vicha, children, life and health, Parnasa Ba'achava, and we should finally merit, even before Yom Kippur, the source of this great soul, great man, whose address is there. The Rebbe knows where it is. Bring the Ula Amitis Vashem, where Chesed will ultimately prevail and reveal the full emes of the course of godliness in this world.
Shikoyach, thank you very much, Rabbi Jacobson. It was inspiring and he said obligatory. It gives us all, we are obligated to continue the world that Rabbi Leader created. We have with us the community doctor, Aish Chesed, who is devoted and dedicated, the one who had probably the biggest headaches of Rabbi Leader, involved in phone calls and stuff like this that I myself witnessed countless times. Thank you for being here tonight on behalf of the family. Please come up and say a few words in honor of Rabbi Leader.
I'm not a speaker, just follow the speaker. And I'm unprepared. Nevertheless, I stand in awe of our leader, of the work he did, of the availability, being able to reach him 24 hours a day, of his never saying no if I asked him to do something, if there was a need. And so what do we learn? What can we take from this man? Two things. There's tzedakah and chesed. They're not the same. We can give tzedakah, you write a check or you go online, or even someone comes to ask you and you take out a dollar bill or a $10 bill and you don't look him in the face. And you actually give the person very little. It's an obligation that you've fulfilled. And then there's chesed. There's real chesed. There's chesed when you meet the person in need, when you join with them, when you share their pain, when you relieve their suffering. Rabbi Leader was a man of chesed. He was a person who interacted very closely with those in need and shared their suffering and took their pain and helped them with his leiv nefesh. Perhaps we should all, before we go into Yom Kippur, take upon ourselves not only to give tzedakah, that of course we should do, but we should take upon ourselves to become kinder people, give ourselves, devote ourselves to someone who needs, and will make a much better place for the world in which we live, as Rabbi Leader surely did, make the world a dwelling place for God, and to his son, continuing the good work. You should have strength. You should really carry the flag that your father hoisted and go further. Take it even further. Martha Cemetery.
Shkoyach Dr. Rosen, short and to the point. We have with us another doctor who was very involved with Rabbi Leader, always there for him. I'd like to call up Dr. Ziskin to say a few words.
First, the family, the guests. When I think of Rabbi Leader, I think of I think of someone who is pure, whose neshama was pure, who gave himself over for others completely, utterly and completely. As Dr. Rosen said, he did not know the meaning of the word no. It's funny, I haven't gotten a text from Rabbi Leader in quite a while. And today my WhatsApp goes off and I see Rabbi Leader sent me a text and I got a little nervous. But I was asked to say a few words. We know it is brought down by the Zohar that when a parents give a child a name, there is no such a thing as randomness or happenstance. Rabbi Avraham, named after our great forefather, Avraham. Avraham was known for chesed, for bimilas chasadim, for doing for others, for doing anything he can for another human being. That's what Klal Yisrael was established upon. And that was Rabbi Leader's Soy Neshama. That's who he was as a person. When hospitals hire liaisons, patient representatives, typically the hospitals hire these individuals because they know that a happy patient is a good customer. It's customer service. It brings more business in, more Google reviews. It looks better for the hospital. But Rabbi Leader wasn't that sort. Rabbi Leader Shlichus wasn't for the hospital. It was for the Yid. It was for every individual. What does this person need? Who would be the right shliach for this individual to help cure this person? How can this person's going home, does not have a hospital bed. I will arrange a hospital bed with this chesed organization, with this ambulance company that will not charge, with this eye surgeon who will follow up. I know the secretary will let this patient in free of charge because this patient can't afford it. And he understood chesed, he understood how to navigate the system to provide chesed on such an individual, customized level to each patient. I had the opportunity several years ago to go to Kings County to visit Rabbi Leader. After much insistence, I went to see him one day. And he took me on a tour of the hospital, down these long corridors. And we did not go visit any patients. He did not take me to the emergency room. But he showed me the ophthalmologist, the eye doctor, who helps him with patients. He showed me the neurosurgeon's office, who he knows there's 5-6 neurosurgeons. But this one in particular will help a from patient if they just arrived from Eretz Yisrael or elsewhere. This was his hospital. His hospital was chesed. It was helping every single individual patient. It's not often, I practice in Borough Park, it is not often I have a patient come to downstate or Kings County. But I had a friend of mine who was an avid biker. Several years ago was biking down Flatbush Avenue, and an individual opened his car door right prior to him coming down the street. And my friend hit the car door, flipped over, lost consciousness, and was brought to county. First phone call was Rabbi Leader. He met the patient, he met the family in the emergency room. The patient was still unconscious. He arranged for all the doctors, the trauma team, to come down to evaluate this patient. He got the best team involved. This patient was making a bar mitzvah the next night. The patient was desperate to had his only son's bar mitzvah the next night, not to be in hospital. This patient, good friend of mine, had many broken ribs, broken feet. One of his clavicles, one of his shoulder bones are broken. And the doctor told the family there's just no way he's going home for the bar mitzvah. So the leader sat with the family and he said, let me see what I can do. Let's see how he feels tomorrow morning. How the next morning the patient gets up, he feels a little better. And Rabbi Leader pushes and pushes for this patient to go home. And the nurses, the social worker says the patient can't go home. There's no hospital bed. There's no visiting nurse service. There's no follow-up appointment. No problem. All taken care of in a matter of a few hours. And this gentleman merited to be at his son's bar mitzvah in Yartzeit. This is one of, I'm sure, thousands of stories that we all have of Rabbi Leader, who is known as Ish Chesed. How noble is it? How noble is it, after one is nifter, to be legendary, to become greater perhaps in death than in life, to be known forever as Ish Chesed, someone whose whole soul was chesed and to give to others. I will end with a beautiful story that I heard from the Divrei Chaim, from Psalms, the Psalms of Rav. In Poland, there was a town, a municipality that was building a road, and the road happened to go through a Jewish cemetery. And they, with outrage, they dug up several of the kfarim to make room for this road. And as they dig up this kever in the Jewish cemetery, they find a priest or someone dressed in priest clothing who is whole, who the Malach Kabbalah did not touch, who did not decompose, but the body was whole. And it made a big ruckus in the town. What is the deal behind this? Someone who was nifter hundreds of years ago to be buried in priest clothing in the Jewish cemetery. There must be some story. And an Al Yid came by and he said, I know the story behind this. There was a Baal Tzedakah, someone who ran the town coffers or Anian, who one Erev Shabbos ran out of money, could not distribute money for poor people. And an individual came to him and said he has no food for Shabbos. So he said, listen, I went to everybody, there's no money in the account. I'll tell you what, I'll go around again and I'll try to collect money. And he goes around to the town, and barely he's able to collect money for this person for Shabbos. But he makes it. About an hour before Shabbos, an almana comes to him and says that she has no money for Shabbos, she has no food for Shabbos. And he says, I don't know what to do. I already went to everyone 2-3 times. There's nowhere more to go. I'm sorry, there's nothing to do. And she started crying. She said, please help me. So he says, you know what I'm going to do? He says, next to the town, there is a little bar where the Goyim hang out. I don't go there, but I'm going to go and see what I can do. Maybe somebody will be generous there. And this Gabbai Tzedakah goes to this bar in this Krishna, and the rowdy Goyim are there, and he starts pleading to them for some rubles, for some money. And one of the Goyim says, I'll make you a deal. He goes, I have a clothes of a priest in my house. I'll make you a deal. If you put on these clothes and you walk through town with it, I'll give you the money you need. And without thinking, he said, I will do it. And they sent a young boy to run to this guy's house. He comes back with priest clothing. This Gabbai Tzedakah adorns this embarrassing clothing of a priest. And he walks through town, and they're laughing behind him, and they're throwing things at him. And he's terribly, terribly embarrassed. He comes home, he takes the clothing off, he gives the almana her money, he takes the clothing off, he washes himself off, and he throws it into his closet. Years later, the Divrei Chaim is passing through town, as the Rebbe's used to do in those days. And the Divrei Chaim stops through town, and he says, I smell the Tam Gan Eden. There's a Tam Gan Eden coming through this town. And he walks through the town, and he smells with his nose, and he goes from house to house. And he stops at this Gabbai Tzedakah's house, and he knocks on the door, and the Gabbai Tzedakah answers, and he says, you have to let me into the house. There is Gan Eden in this house. And he says, Rebbe, come in, lets him in, and the Rebbe walks through the house and goes straight to the closet, and he opens the closet door, and there on the floor are the priest's clothing. The Divrei Chaim tells him, you should be buried in this clothing. It is a ticket to Gan Eden, and you will not be harmed in death. That's exactly what happened. When I think of Rabbi Leader, who was a mentor, who was a man who emulated chesed, pure chesed, it is such a light for all of us to try to emulate him to a small degree, to try to be a little kinder, try to do chesed to others, try to realize that we are not here to enjoy the pleasures of life. We are here to serve the Rebbeinu Shalom in many different ways, but chesed is perhaps one of the most important ways. And here is a man who we knew, who we touched, we spoke to, who perhaps we took for granted his greatness, and now that he's no longer here, we recognize how great he really was. And the lesson, particularly for me, is to try to emulate him, to try to help others, to think of him, to do for others, perhaps irrationally, not with cheshbon, but with belief cheshbon. Zikr, Rabbi Avraham is looking down with nachas at his family and at the organization he created. I think it is upon us, incumbent upon us, to support his children as they follow in his footsteps. And Be'ez Hashem, he will be a Me'el Tzeicher as he was for this community. He'd be a Me'el Tzeicher for all of Klal Yisrael. Thank you.
We have one more speaker, and then we're going to wrap up. Before I call up the next speaker, I want to share with you something personal. Started this evening with what Avraham was all about, how we did chesed with love, and how Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe always wrote in the letters that there is the Eibishter created one Adam. Everything he created many, because one individual can change the world. We live in a time, I'm going to be a little personal for a moment. Again, I'm not trying over here to make us people difficult or painful standing before you keep it. So I want to share something personal. My brother is sitting here. A lot of friends are sitting here. There's a common denominator that all the people are sitting here and the people who are watching, the people who know about Rome. The common denominator is people of action. People of actually going out of the way. I'm looking around the room and I see people who push it, not just sitting in an office and saying, yeah, write a check. People who go out of the way to do chesed. A time we live in the world we live in our days, if something painful happens, especially such an incident, and Rosh Hashanah by night, Rabbi Avraham passed away. In America, and in the world we live in today, it gives you the right to go into some sort of they call it safe zone. You have the right to be depressed. You have the right to be upset. You have the right to cry. Those of you who know, about 3 years ago almost, our family lost a special sister. Again, it's not about, don't talk about me, about the family. But it was a third tragedy who struck my parents. We lost 3 daughters. And that time, I reached out. It was before Purim. My sister passed away. She was a special girl, my sister Ricky. And I asked my father, because the year earlier, his mother passed away. My Rabbi, the Holocaust survivor that went through Auschwitz, and his father. It's finally the time that he can go to shul and say Yizkor, because until then, he couldn't say Yizkor, because his parents were alive. My older sister, Chana Bela, was already gone for many, many years. My sister, Chayalushka, was gone for 20-something years. And here's the third, and finally, he can go to Yizkor to shul. I said, being Dudi, those who know me, I always have to know that that's the right question. That I got thrown out of class 3 times a day. I asked, Tati, what are you going to think about when you got to say Yizkor? And the answer is, we're coming into Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, we read about Aaron HaKohen, Achrei Mois. He lost 2 of his children. And the Eibishter tells him that he's going to go in every Yom Kippur to Kodesh HaKadoshim, as they say in English, to the scene of the crime, where he lost his 2 children. And over there, in the scene of the crime, he's not going to put down flowers and cry and say, I lost my children. In that place, he says a tefillah. He takes the pain, he turns it in to love, to caring and giving. I was saying in the shul by me over there in Muncie, I have a shul in the back of my head. I said, the house, the highlight of Rosh Hashanah by night, the Chintin Pachtecho, the world is shaking. You finish davening, the David Mizmor, the people are like, don't talk. They say to them, what does they say? What's the punchline of the whole Rosh Hashanah by night? Turn around to a friend and give him a bracha. Abbas Chesed. David and the family and the Almanah, the Tzaliter, continued. They didn't lock themselves up. If you look at the address of Abbas Chesed, 720 Lefferts, they say, we're going in over here on a strike. It was Abraham's Meshugasim running to the G building and giving some guy gefilte fish because he likes a cannon bar. I remember one day I get a phone call. Do you get it still? G building? No, gefilte fish in a job. Well, the guy passed away. They're going to the G building with a jar of gefilte fish. That's what the guy wanted. The point is that David and the family took upon themselves to continue the Meister weaker, the Father's way. And it's our responsibility to do everything we can to help, to continue, until he turns the world upside down and he comes back to us with the Rebbe. So I would like to call upon David to say the final words, and Mishnova Lagmar Simatera. And afterwards,
I came this a little bit unprepared. So I'll open my kids. To my father, to me. My father was chizuk every day. Gives me a kunz to wake up in the morning and understand what is the purpose of life. The purpose of life is what? Why do we get up in the morning to do what? I think to myself every day this question. What did my father do? Why he wanted to do what he did? And I understand why he did what he did. He did it because he wanted to take burden of other people. He didn't want people to feel helpless, like he felt at some point in his life, but he didn't want people to feel helpless. He didn't want you to feel the burden. In my own life, over the last few years, my wife has been going through a lot of pain. And whenever my father would have interaction with me on the phone, he would say, David, take care of this ride. David, take care of it. I never heard it once. I love you. Not even once. Like, my father said, I love you. One time, say, I love you. The one time, what happened? About a month after he passed away, I heard my wife Simply hearing the voice now. Simply, I love you. Simply, we need soup is outside the door. All this time, within my life, I don't know how he must be in my life. And I see, why is my wife happy? Because my father's taking care of my wife. He's keeping her safe. So when my father passed away, I took him to Achota to continue his work. Don't stop his work. Maybe I cannot reach to his heights right now, but one day we will reach his heights. Another thing I want to say is we are continuing the organization. If somebody calls us, we answer. We take care of it. Also, I want to say thank you to people who did this first year. It was very, very important keeping me because every time I needed help, Rabbi was there to answer the phone. And of course, Dr. Rosen, whenever I came in, he also gave me inspiration. forward. I'm going to continue my father's work. And see my father in the chef's house.
Well, Rabbi say, I'm Chayit and the Liboy. Closing statement. I once heard that, I said it many times, but it's good to say it again, that the rooster once, the rooster, no, that's not the chicken met the chazer in the farm, and he said to him who's more dedicated. You know, when the farmer eats his breakfast, there's there's bacon and eggs. The chazer said, I'm more dedicated because I'm allowing myself to be killed in order for my boss to have breakfast. The chicken said to the chazer, you see, that's why you're a chazer. You kill yourself once and you're done. I get up every morning, 3 o'clock, to lay an egg. So, talking about dedication, the Avas Chesed, and our responsibility, David continue to be dedicated to the Father's doings. It's our obligation to help you. And I'm going to finish with one thing. As we come for Rosh Hashanah, we get to Yom Kippur, and each one of us wants to come and know is the most important thing. Just think about the way of Chesed that Avraham, Rabbi Leader used to do. Remember in the soup kitchen, yeah? His idea was, I don't know, but being busy, they were always making sure everybody's eating and serving. And then he had some guy who was one of the families of the Lubavitch, Avraham was a little bit sick, and he kept him upstairs and he made sure he eats. One time I got a phone call to go to the hospital to bring orange juice and cookies because there's a girl over there that she only likes Tropicana orange juice. Going into the details, visiting every day, Rachmiel's brother, he was in the hospital every day, would go out and visit. There was a girl from Israel who slipped in front of 770, not thinking, who am I helping now? Is it somebody that has, I'm going to get something out? It doesn't matter. So it's a moment, so it's a G building, so he's going to buy a big shalabah sausage by Arcade to bring to somebody in the hospital. In the details to make people happy. This is our responsibility, to continue this. I want to thank you, the doctors. I want to thank Rabbi Jacobson. I want to thank Shlomo, the Gottesman, and I want to thank the family. And may we partner up and continue doing the good things. Those of you who didn't give yet, the link is live. Yeah? Give as much as you can. 1800 dinar. Mars in the table.
אתה חיתנת אותי. אני בפרילה.